Hello, everyone, and welcome to Heart and Hand Rangers podcast. This is your extra show for the week. My name is Cammy Bell. I'm your host as always. And joining me, fresh in the door, to talk about a fairly insipid performance at Ibrox as our Europa League campaign kicked off, is Grant Sneddon. Grant, thank you for joining me. It's a late recording. As I say, we are both not long back from Ibrox. That was a fairly dismal performance by Rangers. The crowd, pretty much as expected, plenty of empty seats in Ibrox. And no wonder. And I'll be honest with you, there was parts of my thought process. I was watching the game unfold thinking, my word, is there anything better I can spend 50 quid on a Thursday night on?
First of all, hello, Cammy, hello, everyone. And yeah, it was a long, lonely journey back from Ibrox back to Falkirk, where I reside, and a lot to ponder over. Cammy, a lot to reflect upon, and yeah, it's just one of those times where usually on a Thursday night, Cammy, and you can go back to 2018 for this conversation. Thursday nights are usually beaming with confidence, both pre and post match, and a lot to talk about, both in a positive sense. And there's just nothing at the moment that we can talk positively about. We can talk about things in a general sense. We can look specifically at tonight's game for that as well. But yeah, but thank you for having me on. It's my first extra of the season, so it's always a pleasure, mate.
Yeah, I mean, always a pleasure. It's probably doing a bit of heavy lifting there, but I do appreciate you being able to come on. And as I say, we'll talk a little bit about the game against Genk and look ahead towards Sunday's game against Livingston as we head to whatever Almond Vale is called this week. I don't know if it's still the Tony Macaroni. I'll work that out as we go. But yeah, on to tonight, Grant. And I think, coming out of Ibrox, as I was leaving, there was chance of, Russell Martin, we do not wish you here, or words to that effect, which I won't repeat on a family show. And I think, upon a bit of reflection, there's an element where the difficulty I think that most Rangers fans have at the moment is we can understand that there's managers who will come in to Rangers now. We are not getting a top tier manager for two reasons. Firstly, we'd have to pay him an exorbitant amount of money. And secondly, they likely won't come to Rangers because of the footballing setup that we have. It's difficult to entice people to come here when you have to play, Falkirk and Livy and Dundee United 4 times a season. What Rangers fans, for me, and the ones that I've spoken to just now, and the general, feedback I get is very much around the lack of improvement. We are not seeing anything that is moving in the right direction. And by that, I also mean the football, because we are so lacking in any kind of form of creativity going forward. We can have plenty of the ball, we can have plenty of possessions, nice wee passes between you and a guy who's 8 yards away from you, but nothing is going forward. And I think Rangers fans, I understand, and I've spoken about this before on the last few extras in the last few weeks. I totally understand Rangers fans who didn't want Russell Martin. I wasn't, enthralled with the appointment myself. But irrespective of that, I still believe that everyone wanted him to do well, because if he did well, Rangers were doing well, and that's the story. But we are now back at the same period where, save from probably 30 minutes against Victoria Pilsen and maybe some smaller moments in the Old Firm game, I cannot think of any real positives to talk about under any of Russell Martin's performances to date. And I think this is what annoys Rangers fans more than anything else. If we can see the incremental improvements, we will bide our time, we'll bite our tongue. Last Saturday, obviously, was a protest outside of the stadium. And I very much thought to myself, well, this will maybe be the point that the board really take assessment of what's happening. Andrew Kavanagh was at the game at the weekend. He was at the game on Thursday night. Hopefully, and I really do mean this, by the time that the listeners come to hear this show, there could have been changes, but the noise coming out from Ibrox would suggest to me that that isn't happening anytime soon, because the board do have belief in them. I think they must have been the only people in the stadium that felt that a change wasn't required, because everyone else was certainly thinking it. And Rangers now are such an easy, predictable team to play against that it's becoming a dull, meaningless chore to go along and watch those performances. And there was plenty of guys I know who didn't go tonight. They've ran their race with Russell Martin, and as far as they're concerned, they won't be back until he goes. And I feel that number is doing nothing but growing as time goes on.
Yeah, and it's hard to really blame people for having that viewpoint, Cammy, because you are 100% spot on in your assessment of the performances, and you use the word predictable, and that's exactly what we are. That how many times across all the games that we've played this season can you see either one of the centre backs losing the ball moments before it's about to happen? And you can count numerous examples of it. And just specifically on tonight's game, to sort of view case that point, we got pressed far too easily from Genk's front players because there was no movement in the midfield. So when the ball came to Cornelius, it was going one of two places, which was either to Suter or to Makoma. And the amount of times that they counter-pressed the option where the ball was going to go before the pass was played, it's just a recipe for disaster. And the amount of times that teams have been able to get in behind us is astoundingly easy. I don't want to level the "we don't look coached" line at them, because there's obviously a degree of on-grass coaching going on, but we're not seeing any results of that. We're not seeing any clear patterns of play. We're not seeing any clear cohesion in an attacking sense, which, listening to Russell Martin whilst he was at Southampton, after he got sacked by Southampton and before joining us, this is someone who has a clear outlook on how he views the game in an attacking sense. Never really a defensive-minded coach or an outlook on football. He's been very open that he is a possession-based manager who wants to be on the front foot at all times. Yet we have not seen any evidence of that at a club where, for, if you're being generous, 75% of the games that we play, we should be on the front foot, we should be attacking, we should be creating chances endlessly in some games. And it's not happened. And you can point to the Dundee game, you can point to even the Alloa game in the League Cup, where attacking just seems like a chore for us. And you look at players who have been brought in to be the catalyst of that. And if you look at Jadon Gisama, who, when he came on against Panathinaikos in those opening Champions League qualifiers, looked as though he was going to be a real sort of threat for us. He's unpredictable. He can go both ways. Yet, the longer he's been in the system, he seems to have regressed. Oliver Antman, his best performance was that game that you brought up against Pilsen, and it would be fair to say that has been his only performance, because again, he's another player who looks to have regressed. And you bring in two strikers, in Chimiti and Miovski. Now, I'm sure we'll maybe touch on Chimiti a little bit more in depth, but these are two players who need service, yet they look so isolated and asked to do too much. We, at the moment, look as though that every single deficiency that you could think of is actually being highlighted, whilst anything that you could reckon that we would be good at, whether it be pace, whether it be movement, whether it be possession, we don't seem to be enhancing those strengths within our team, both individually and collectively. And it's a real source of frustration because we simultaneously look as though that we're not going to score whilst being cut open at will in any given opportunity by any given team. And it's just simply not sustainable, Cammy.
Yeah, listen, I agree with all of that. I think, just coming back on a couple of points that you raised there as well, we are too deep. Even in Europe, there was points, as I say, against Genk, and it's not the first time that we've seen it on a European stage, and we're certainly doing it domestically, where we have centre halves in our own box at a goal kick. Our midfielders, if they're not sitting on the 18-yard line, they are within 10 yards of that, slightly further up. And then we do have a lone striker who's completely isolated. The thing that, and to touch on your point regarding the Russell Martin Southampton possession base, I do understand all that. The issue that I've got with that is that excuse doesn't run for me for anyone who took the Rangers job. And I'm going to open this up a wee bit, but for anyone who took the Rangers job based on, right, I'm going to watch their games, I'm going to see how they play, I want to understand Scottish football. He's played in this league for this team. And it feels to me like sometimes people totally forget that. He should have known all of this already without even having to do a single minute's worth of research. Now, I'm not saying that the game hasn't changed, and obviously the period he played in for us and all the rest of that context. But the simple fact is, he looks like a guy who hasn't seen Scottish football, doesn't understand the lay of the land, and as a result of that, feels like this is the most effective way for us to be able to set up. Southampton and Rangers are not the same. Southampton, were playing in a totally different, stratosphere of football to us in terms of what we're doing. But we will have possession of the ball. We will expect teams to sit in against us. Well, we did until this manager came in. Now what's basically happened is, as you rightly said, the terminology was perfect. Teams feel free to cut us open at will. Genk did that plenty enough. And for anyone who didn't get a chance to watch the game, firstly, congratulations. And secondly, it was 1-0 going on 5 or 6. And I'm not, I know I'm a bit animated about it all, but I'm not taking the piss. There was clearly about 4 chances that Genk could have scored within the first half alone. I'm not saying that they declared, but they certainly realised at some point through the second half, we don't need to bust their arses here. We're perfectly happy just to let them run about daft, let them chase the ball, let them be wasteful with it, which was an argument that I had with how we played against Hearts, where we Hearts didn't need to do too much to be able to win the ball back off of us. They were perfectly happy to let us make an arse of it, a sloppy pass, some sort of conservative, let's play the ball back and, well, I've underhit it, or, I can just press on against these guys because I know that inevitably they'll just want to play the ball sideways or back the way, but whatever they're going to do, Rangers will not play it forward. So we don't have to worry too much about that. So now we're inviting pressure into it. Genk, and again, I don't think Genk are a bad team. I understand that, they're not doing well domestically. There's parallels there with ourselves. But at the same point, they're still a European team that will be looking to be able to, change how their season is going and using this as a catalyst. I don't remember talking to anyone thinking we could use this as an opportunity to kick on, take what we could for the Hibs game. Let's try and see as to how we can encourage a bit of confidence into the team and then being able to try and take it for there. I think that there's some energy with some of the players. I think that they are hamstrung by the system and by what the manager is telling them to do. Gassama, you're right. There was chances where he brought in some crosses. There's more where I think he gets to the byline a wee bit too much without crossing it in. Antman, when he came on, I thought produced far more than Mikey Moore did. Mikey Moore, no idea why he's starting, because I thought he was terrible against Hearts. I didn't think he was great against Hibs, and I didn't think he was great tonight against Genk. I'm not decrying the player, because there's a part of me, Grant, and again, this is something else that you'd kind of touched on, that says, even with the performances that you're seeing at the moment, I feel that a lot of these players are applying the handbrake because that's what they're told to do. I actually do, and listen, I might get laughed out of town as a result of this, depending on what happens going forward. But I actually think there's a nucleus, there's a modicum of a team in there that I think wants to play better. Chermiti, I'm not giving up on at all. I actually think Chermiti will end up. I think if he gets a goal, I think he's going to go on a run. He's not getting that goal at the moment, Grant, if he's not getting service, and he's not getting service. And I don't understand. I haven't spoken to anyone, not a single individual who is now still within Russell Martin can turn it around camp. And there was plenty of them at the beginning of the season. As results started to go, that number get less and less. Now I think it's completely evaporated. And again, although I do respect Genk and I thought that they were a decent team, I still believe that this Rangers team was capable of getting a result against them tonight. What I think, it was almost like I was surprised and not surprised in equal measure from what I saw on Thursday night, in that this was a Rangers team that struggles to land a punch, but when it takes a punch, it's virtually a knockout, because we cannot score goals with that lack of creativity. So if we go a goal behind, we're certainly not scoring two.
To continue on the boxing analogy, Cammy, we look as though it were a boxer who is actually unable to see the openings for even attempting to land a jab, never mind a knockout punch. We look as though we're fearful of actually throwing it because of what the repercussions could be by leaving ourselves exposed. And the irony of that is we don't need to leave ourselves exposed to be exposed. As we've talked about already, teams are cutting us apart. Well, you mentioned it there. Genk could have easily won that game 4 or 5-0, and we would not have had anything to say about, the result doesn't reflect the game, or it was a freak result, or anything like that. It really wouldn't have been, because the chances that O in particular missed were gilt-edged chances. I think he misses an open goal at one point, or he obviously missed the penalty. A superb save by Jack Butlington. Kudos for that. But to touch on what you're saying about Russell Martin, if you go back to the Dundee game at Ibrox, there was a bit of concern because the Motherwell performance, okay, wasn't a disaster, but the way we sort of ceded control of that game was concerning. Then Dundee didn't have their troubles to seek under Stephen Pressley. They started horribly. Fans didn't want them. Knocked out of the League Cup before even getting out to the knockout stages of the competition. And they turn up to Ibrox and we struggle to land a gov on them until the second half. And you then fast forward to the Hearts game, and then we all know the position we're in, and we have both been going to Ibrox for a long time now, Cammy, as have a lot of our listeners to both the show and over on our Patreon site. I really don't believe we've ever seen the Rangers fan base united so passionately on any issue that Rangers have had over the last, let's say the last decade, because we all know prior to that what issues we faced and everything like that. However, where we are at the moment is so noticeable to anyone who has watched football, has played football, has been involved in football. It's not going to turn around. And I was speaking about this on one of the shows we do on our Patreon site on Monday morning, where I was actually quite hopeful that the Hibs result was going to be used as a springboard, as a platform for us to kick on a little bit, because momentum is everything in football, Cammy, both negatively and positively. And that result, it did sort of ignite a bit of hope in me that, okay, we can now kick on a little bit, because Genk are not the most feared side that have came to Ibrox since our sort of European prowess started under Gerrard in 2018. They are arguably the worst side to have beaten us at Ibrox over that time. If you look at the sides that have beaten us, Lyon, Slavia Prague, Bayer Leverkusen. I can't think of too many more that have beaten us, if there are any, that have beaten us. But they're certainly the worst team, and they weren't anything to be feared. And when I was talking to Simon on the Roundtable show, what I was talking about is that really this is the game that you want to kickstart not only the Europa League campaign, because getting 3 points on the board, first opportunity at home, should have been something that we realistically target. And if we're honest with ourselves, you would have backed us 9 times out of 10 over any of the last 4 or 5 campaigns if this was our opening game to have comfortably knocked this one off. But do you really know anyone who was going into tonight with that sort of confidence, that sort of expectation? It was more in hope than anything else, and that speaks volumes at where we are as a fan base, as a club, and what we're watching. And we've entered a position where no amount of momentum can turn this situation around. And you're one to go back to one of the very first points you made there about Martin really being able to know what the Scottish footballing landscape was about. It either shows an incredible amount of arrogance to believe that he didn't need to fall back on that knowledge, or at least that understanding of what it was, or a lack of due diligence to actually do the necessary framework of how his tactics would be applied in Scotland, and to sort of transmit that to the recruitment meetings to get the players he then needed that would serve him to actually be capable of playing the football he wants to play, and either of which is a damning statement.
Yeah, and that's where I think a lot of fans are at now. You mentioned arrogance within that as well. It's interesting. I made this point to someone the other day where it's interesting to me that I cannot think of a Rangers manager in my lifetime that seems to alienate so many people from his general attitude. You could almost have he's got an undeserved swagger about him, which is not helping him whatsoever. And whilst I want him out of Rangers, I don't necessarily want him ran out of football. I mean, if he goes and becomes a success somewhere else, then fair play to him. It's never going to happen here. But he needs to learn, how to be able to communicate that better. I have no idea how he's doing this with the players at the training ground. They believe in what he's telling them because the evidence is there. I feel a lot of them at the moment will just now feel I've got to follow the manager's orders because the way how they're playing is demonstrated. It's there for all to see. Coming back on to the game specifically, Grant, I think that, as I say, as you're watching the game unfold, the hope that you mentioned there about people, thinking that the weekend's game against Hibs could have been a platform was dissipating within, I think, the first 15 minutes when we easily could have been 2 or 3 goals down. Rangers did create chances. I think we have to be fair and say that, Gassama was unlucky with a chance that cut in the second half. The penalty decisions, I'm keen to get your thoughts on. I'm going to be honest, and this is not me with a refereeing hat on, but I thought that the decision against Rangers for the penalty when Tav had the header at the back post and it was a handball, I'm going to say I can see them being given and not given in equal measure. I thought that the penalty that Rangers conceded was not intentional by Tavernier. I don't mean that he's seen the guy's been able to get away from him, and then he's ended up bringing him down. It wasn't that. I think it's a coming together, but there is a correction, and he goes down and takes it for there. And I also want to get your thoughts on the Diomande red card as well, because again, I think if you removed all of those incidents out of this, save Rangers been able to get the penalty and take the lead, and if we were to continue to play in such a conservative fashion, we could have walked away from that game with a 1-0 win. However, take the penalty decisions out of it and the red card, I cannot blame the referee for what happened at Ibrox on Thursday night. The Diomande red card for me, I thought I didn't think it had malicious intent, but it's also a very stupid tackle to make. I think he was being fouled in the build-up to that tackle, which the referee could have given, but then there's probably a degree of frustration as well. But again, I don't think he's set out to properly go after the player. It's just a really stupid, badly timed challenge. I'm struggling to be able to then, with the blue tinted specs on, say these decisions were completely unfair against us.
I think the first thing that we have to say is that even if it had stayed 11v11 and the red card didn't happen, I still wouldn't have had confidence of us kicking on at any level, because we were being outplayed, we were being outmatched, we were being outfought in every sense of each of those aspects of it. And I don't think it would have got any better, in all honesty. However, that doesn't, and again, over on our Patreon site, I had a very similar discussion in regards to the decisions that were given in the Hearts game a couple of weeks ago, and how those could have impacted the game, and how that shifts that momentum in play. To go through them one by one, and in order as well. Our penalty, I thought it was a penalty at the time. Now, it's the opposite end of the ground from both of us. We sit similar areas within Ibrox, Cammy, and I thought it was a penalty at the time. Watching it back, my mind hasn't changed on it. Especially when you see how the handball law is applied now, and let's be honest, the inconsistency of decisions that are given because of handball across all different metrics of it, and intent, distance, deviations of teammates, or deviations of ball, or distance away from it. There is a complete and utter inconsistency in the handball rule, and I think, first of all, that has to be addressed as an urgent matter. Otherwise, we're just going to see decisions like this continue. The letter of the law is it's a handball. Hand is in an unnatural position, whether it's intentional or not. It's making the player's body bigger, and it stops the ball going towards goal. I don't think it's a foul. If you genuinely believe that is a foul, then you are really going down to the minutiae of it, and you are disregarding, in my opinion, natural in-game contact for that. So I think we should have been awarded a penalty. The red card, as you know, I messaged into our group chat live at the game that I did not think it was a red card. From the angle I was sitting at, he won the ball for me. And watching it back, again, my opinion hasn't changed on that. He does win the ball. The issue is his momentum carries him over the ball, and his studs make a connection above ankle height, which, again, letter of the law, it is a red card, and it's really just a change in nature of the way that football is refereed and how the law is applied, that does become a red card. I do agree with you that it was a needless tackle, because he does dive into it a little bit. Now, he doesn't leave the ground for me. He doesn't go in two-footed, but it becomes I think it's reckless endangerment. It comes under when players go over the top of the ball with studs showing. So I don't have any complaints on the record having watched it back. And I think that sort of gets aimed at Diamandi for giving the referee a decision to make, because if he just stays on his feet, then he stays in the park, obviously, and then he doesn't give that referee a decision. Their penalty, I'm in two minds on this, in all honesty, because I think that the Genk player initiates the contact if there is any. I believe there is minimal contact. Now, it comes down to that argument of, is the threshold for contact higher for giving a penalty than it is a free kick? And we can argue about that, because we all say, and we have all said at games, if that was outside the box, that would be a free kick. So why is it not a penalty? But we all know that the threshold in most instances is higher for giving a penalty because of the potential game-changing nature of that decision. It's one of those ones where if it was my team who were being awarded the penalty, I would want it to stand. And if I am the team on the receiving end of that penalty, I want it overturned, or I'm not wanting the penalty to be given. I go back to a Chris Boyd comment a couple of years ago where he says if it's a soft penalty or a stick-on penalty, it doesn't really matter because it's still a penalty. I do believe it is on the harsher nature of it, but perhaps the right decision was reached in all three counts. And I don't know what you think specifically on the third one. Again, asking you to put your referee's hat on a little bit, but that's where I am with it.
Yeah, I mean, it's in a nutshell, it's one of those ones where, you know, if you see it given, you want it. If it's for you, you want it, you know, decried if it's against you. So yeah, I'm still sticking with my opinion. I get the build up play for the Tav penalty, for the handball. I think that it's so difficult. I literally do not understand. Maybe this is what I've seen domestically. I'm failing to understand the handball law now. I genuinely don't get it. It needs clarified. I don't want to be that whole, I hate it because of the, you know, I don't get it. I don't think that the rules are clear enough now, and they need clarified. That's a simple, you know, way of being able to look at it. If that happens or not, we will wait and see. But the bottom line, however, is I don't think that for me the red card and the penalty given against us had an overarching decision or an overarching influence in how the game was played. It didn't help. I thought that the only thing that could have maybe helped us a little bit more as the game progressed, obviously at half time, Mikey Moore comes off and Oliver Antman comes on. I thought that was a bit of a surprise because I thought you might want to try and bring in a midfielder in there if it was going to potentially be Barron or Joe Rothwell or whatever. And he didn't make a change early on enough in the second half for me. I thought that he would have changed it on the hour mark. I thought Joe Rothwell, when he came on, I thought he looked pretty good. I thought he wanted to advance with the ball. The last couple of appearances from him actually been a bit of an upturn, so there is a green shoot there. And as I say, we just, it's one of those games, Grant, where I think we could still be playing hours after the game finishes and would still be in the same position where we wouldn't have scored, we wouldn't have created enough chances, and that's the theme now. And as we let's kind of move on to Livingston on Sunday. Livingston just above us in the table, but so is the majority of all the clubs. And this, I'm going to feel like I'm repeating myself, and I apologise to the listeners for doing so. He has to win on Sunday. He has to be able to get a result. Dropping points, and I mean, even just getting a draw isn't good enough any longer. I stand by what I've said previously, that I don't think that the season the league season is out of reach. I don't think it's a great Celtic team. I don't think that they're running away with it. I think, you've got some teams that are kind of playing well and they're not doing overly badly. Obviously, Hearts are joint top at the moment, but as you can see nowadays with Aberdeen, teams can start really well and then they can kind of start to fall away. I think that'll happen. So for me, if you can get a win on the board, then it's essential. Anything else other than a win, I think we just I don't know what else the fans can do other than protest outside the door. You can hear the chants inside the ground when your fans are joining in with the away fans of you're getting sacked in the morning, when you're not seeing hospitality seats being sold, when you're not seeing European games being sold, when you're not seeing League Cup quarter-final tickets being sold, then there's nothing more, as far as I'm concerned, the fans can do as things are going at the moment. If he loses on Sunday, my hope is that he does find some degree of humility and he walks. But I'll be honest with you, I'm not convinced. We're going up against a David Martindale side, and I've got a lot of time for David Martindale. I think Livingston did the right thing by sticking with him when they went down. They obviously came back up. But he's an excellent coach and he can read games very, very well. I think his players work for him. I think they fight for him. And I think right now, as things stand, if you had to pick a point at any stage where you had to get Rangers to come to your stadium to play against you, you'd be wanting this Rangers team in this current crisis.
Well, to give you a sort of example of that, all my friends who are Falkirk supporters have been texting me since half time of the Genk game saying, I hope he stays until the international break at the very minimum, because they fancy their chances against us at the Falkirk Stadium in 2 weeks' time. The one thing we don't have at this moment in time, as we sit here recording at the moment, Cammy, is the benefit of what is going to be said or actions that are going to be taken prior to the Livingston game over the next sort of 48 hours. We don't know if, for example, Andrew Kavanagh is going to come out with he's got so many games to save his job. We don't know if he's going to come out and unequivocally back Russell Martin. We don't know what the players are going to come out and say during the presser, or what Russell Martin's going to come out and say for the presser before Livingston either. So there's a lot that could unfold. There is a lot that could happen between now and the Livingston game. But let's go on the premise of where we sit at the moment. Things are going to remain in situ. Then I really don't see any way out of this for Russell Martin at the moment, because even if he does win, and we really should be going to Livingston expecting to win, there shouldn't be I hope he can get a win. That is verging into very dangerous territory for a Rangers manager when we're saying that we hope he can get a win away to Livingston. But if he does win, do you really then have the confidence that he then goes to Falkirk the following week to build on that and then get a second win on the trot? Or even if he was to win both of those games, do you then think that the international break is going to help with that and that carries on that momentum? I go back to what I said coming out of the Hibs game, that really that should have been used as a platform. You can't have too many instances where one win is viewed as, right, this is where we finally kick on, because if you just keep saying that, you're approaching November, December time and you've not really kicked on. You're below 12, 15 points in the league, which just is completely and utterly unacceptable, in all honesty. And my viewpoint on this hasn't changed since the Bruges game, Cammy, where we are in a position which we have found ourselves in under Michael Beale and Philippe Clement and Gio to an extent as well, that it doesn't matter if the manager goes on or the team go on to win 5 out in the next 5 games. If you draw or get beaten the 6th game, everyone is just going to turn around and say, I knew this wouldn't last. I knew this was unsustainable and I knew this result was coming. And that in turn is unsustainable for a Rangers manager. You cannot you cannot go week to week under that pressure and thrive within that environment, both as a manager and a player. The only real solution is a decision that should have been taken weeks ago, in my own personal opinion. But I also sit here in the hope and almost this sort of desperate last roll of the dice situation where I hope this turns, because if it doesn't, then really we are fighting and I absolutely love the optimism that you have, by the way, in saying that the league isn't over, and I can see that viewpoint and the merits within that as well, because realistically a run of 5-6 wins and you could be back within some sort of touching distance where you go, right, we're back in a position where if we win the next game against them, you're then only a point behind, and then anything can happen from that. My issue is that I don't have the confidence in either the way that the team are performing at the moment or the manager's inability to get the team performing at the moment to actually believe in my heart of hearts that that run is anywhere close to coming.
Yeah, and it's the hope that kills you, right? Because it's your head and heart conundrum, because your heart is hoping that you can get it turned around and it starts a degree of momentum and being able to try and take it. But your head is turning around saying, I can't see it. And I can't see it because I am not being convinced by what's in front of me. The evidence is there. And he's had enough games now. You know, I came out after the opening game at Fir Park and I said, you know, these problems are there and he has the opportunity to fix it. And we fast forward now, and I'll be honest with you, Grant, I genuinely think he'll be coming out of Allenville saying exactly the same thing on Sunday afternoon. That is where we are now, and that's why I just think it's important for us to be able to act swiftly. And I said it at the top of the show. I very much hope that we are in changed circumstances by the time that we go to Livingston on Sunday with the required change, because it is required now. He has to be removed from position. But I don't think he will be, because, again, it's the hope-heart, conundrum of, well, in my heart of hearts, I want him to win. I want him to do that. But in my head, it's illogical. We've just said now it's only a matter of time. And we mentioned, I think, the boys mentioned in Flagship at the beginning of the week, a win can change it, but also a series of wins can change it. But it's your next defeat. And then your next defeat, it's all gone again. And then that's where we are. I actually think what people will say now, and I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves because I know you've mentioned Falkirk, then the international break. See, if I'm being perfectly honest with you, Grant, what I think will happen next is I think that if we can get to that international break, and that might be the turning point if the performances and results haven't been good enough, because I've got one eye on the League Cup semi-final. And right now, as things stand, he's mentioned before about players struggling under the pressure, being able to try and do that. I don't think these players have had too much pressure, right? I don't agree with that synopsis at all. Everyone in Ibrox on Thursday night, irrespective of whether you were at the protest before, your feelings towards the head, everyone wanted that Rangers team to win. So the fans are behind you. Going into a 50-50 split of an Old Firm semi-final, that's pressure. And if he's worried about what's happened at the moment so far, God only knows how feared he must be about getting into that semi-final. I don't believe it's true, if I'm being perfectly honest. I think there's enough players in there of a high enough calibre who can manage those circumstances. I think it's been touted as an excuse to try and take a wee bit of deflection off of him, his plans, his tactics, everything else as well. I don't like the way that he's done it, but he's done it now. So, as I say, that marker is out there. But fundamentally, Rangers cannot go to West Lothian on Sunday and not come back with a win. I stand by that point. And we're at the stage already, as I say, where the fans have given up on him. I strongly suspect that there will be Rangers fans who will say a defeat to Livingston wouldn't be the worst thing because it's just going to make this required move happen. And I'm struggling to argue against that. I don't think any Rangers fan wants Rangers to lose, but what Rangers fans want is to be able to see a Rangers team that is far, far more entertaining than this and can get results and not make teams look even better than they actually are because we're so gun shy and we're so easy to play against that basically it's a free for all.
Yeah, and this is the frustration, Cammy, because we've mentioned at the top of the show as well that there was a wide portion of support that, okay, didn't want Russell Martin, but desperately wanted it to work. And the positive that at least a lot of people that I had spoken to were clinging to was his Southampton team in the Championship were entertaining. They were free-flowing, they were goal scorers, they were cutting teams open at will, and the positive to cling on to was if he can transfer that and harness that and recreate it at Rangers, then we could be onto something here. But we are yet to see really any real signs of it, even coming close to fruition. And you mentioned pressure of the Old Firm games or the games at Ibrox at the moment. Isn't that his job to release that from the players though and sort of take that pressure on himself and then really release them to play freely and openly and express themselves? That's his job. And where I sort of landed at the moment is one of three things are evident to me is that, and you mentioned, and this is on the back of the point you were saying, you came out of Fir Park saying you can see problems within the setup, within the structure, and he needs to address it. At the moment, I believe that either, and I say this, one of three things, he either doesn't know what the problems are, that's worrying. He doesn't know how to fix the problems to turn this around, again, which is worrying. Or he does know, but he's unable to get that idea and communication across to the players to change it. Any of the three scenarios, or a combination of them, are damning on any manager at any level, because that is your role and your function is to negate the problems that the team are facing and go and highlight the strengths of the team. And I've said it again earlier on that we seem incapable of doing that. Every single player that is in that team at the moment, you could list off a reel of weaknesses, of negatives, and you would struggle to really point out the strength of many players in that team. And that is worrying, because the investment that we have put in over the summer, now slightly less than what I wanted it to be and where I felt it needed to be, but it's still a big investment in terms of wages, loan fees, transfer fees. It is a huge outlay. Yet you at this moment really only say that one position has been upgraded on, and partly due to default of not really having anyone there to upgrade on, and that's Jerry Gisama. Everyone else at this moment in time is either in the position of the jury is still out on them, or our mind is made up that they're not going to cut it. At Ibrox, Max Aarons, for example. and how disastrous that loan signing has turned out to be. I just don't get any confidence going to Livingston because, look, we've had bad results there in the past. You can point to the fact that Gerrard's been beaten up there in his first season. We've had tough games up there under Gio, and Bale come on to a degree in his first season there as well. It's not a place where we've regularly went and ran amok and got goals and created endless amounts of chances. It's always been hard fought. And as much as you're saying, okay, let's go and win the game, but does winning that game 1-0 or 2-1, and it's a really scrappy performance where we've not created a lot of chances, but we've sneaked a victory, does that do a lot for this team? I really don't think it does.
No, not at all. It needs to be a result and a performance. A 91st minute penalty, which is your first shot on target, will certainly not do it. So, yes, we will have to see. But it has to improve, and it's in Russell Martin's hands. So we will see what happens next. Grant, I want to thank you for coming on. It's been a cathartic conversation, and as I say, it's not easy to do these pods. It's not easy to listen to them. So I'd like to thank the listeners as well for sticking by us in terms of going through this. If you would like to listen to more of our content, head on over to patreon.com/heart and hand. Thank you to Mike Lee and Paul Myers, but mostly, Grant, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a late shift, and as I say, we'd love to be sitting on here full of beans talking about great Rangers performances. It's not happening, but you've done a great job of being able to come on and break down the game and what's happening at the moment.
No, thank you, Cammy. This is just part and parcel of it, isn't it? Where you don't always get the positives. We have to talk these things, and we have to do it in a constructive manner, which I felt that both you and I have done this evening, and echo your sentiments for thanking the listeners for sticking by us at the moment. Hopefully, in the not too distant future, we will have more positive pods to talk about. But thank you for having me, Cammy.
David will be back with you on Monday, folks, unpacking the Livingston game, and I'll be back with you next Friday as our European adventures continue. Thanks, everyone, for listening. We'll speak to you again soon. Bye-bye.